Okay, let's see. Well, I thought we would start our time together by sharing a couple definitions to serve as part of our common understanding, at least while we're together. And I have two definitions for behavior. The first actually comes from a regional health district, so it's kind of that mental health, regional health supports perspective. Behavior is the way a person acts in response to a particular situation. Okay. And the second definition that I pulled just from the good old dictionary, Merriam-Webster, it talks about behavior as a response of an individual, a group, or a species to its environment. And I guess I like both of these definitions in that it kind of helps us understand that there's an interaction when you talk about behavior. And it really is a noun, though sometimes it feels like it should be a verb, but it's a noun. But there's an interaction that happens. And many times when you're troubleshooting or talking to someone about particularly behaviors that are uncomfortable or dangerous or that we don't want to see in our setting, people say, I don't know, it just happens. 1 minute we're doing this and then boom, it happens. And that is not the case. There's always more going on, whether we see it or not, whether we hear it or not, whether we're even cognizant of it happening. Sometimes it's not random. There's a pattern. There's something going on in the background. It may be the way something smells, maybe a feeling in the air. It might be an experience that happened long before we were face to face, but there's always an interaction and a response. And I think that's important for us to consider, or maybe keep in mind as we move through our time together. I hope it helps. The other thing I want to share with you is I'm going to invite you to join in my perspective or the stance that I believe is important, particularly for educators. It's served me fairly well over the last 30 years of working with boys and girls and families. Navigating life with other human beings in general probably be the better way to say that, but particularly in an educational setting. And I'm going to invite you to see potential. Okay, we can all grow, change, learn, and we can expect that of our students. We see potential. We can presume competence. Expect those students that we have to learn. That's my expectation, that at some point you will learn to use a behavior that's more appropriate to this setting than perhaps another setting where you've used it. And then, as always, as educators, teach, practice, reinforce the expectations that we want to see in our setting. Don't assume anything. I would always do a check to make sure that when I say we're going to walk to the classroom from the door of the school building, this is what it looks like when we walk, and I'm going to describe it to you, and I'm going to tell you what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it might even feel like. So then everybody knows. At least that's Mrs. Stovall's definition of how we walk down the hall from the front door of the school to our classroom. So just tuck those away. You might want to pull them back out every once in a while to consider them while we talk today, but I'm going to share some behavioral basics for you to consider. And that's really where this session is going. Our focus is not so much on developing a behavior intervention plan or doing some of those intensive supports that we sometimes have to provide for students. We're just going to start at the very beginning. You don't have to be a specialist. You don't have to be an individual with advanced degrees in behavior. We're just going to talk about some of the general considerations that we sometimes need to be aware of in order to work with boys and girls and young people, and sometimes adults. Number one, behavioral consideration number one, I can't make anyone do anything. Okay, now this is one of my favorite pictures because you just look at his face and you can tell exactly what's going on. Someone does not want to clean that plate. Nope, not looking to do it. Probably not going to be convinced to do it. There's That expression says it all. And I can't make anyone do anything. I just can't. So I'm going to ask you to share out a little bit, and let me turn to this screen. I want you to tell me, and you can go to this link at menti.com and enter that code if you're on a computer, or if you have a phone and you want to scan that code in. How will you get this student to clean his plate? How will you get this guy? Maybe not your student, maybe he's your nephew or your child or your cousin. How will you get him to clean his plate? Because he's not leaving the table until he does, right? So while you are coming up with ways to help the student or help us get that plate clean, I'm going to ask you to go to menti.com, put in the code, and there's already a response. Does he need to clean his plate? Good question. This is going to be a great conversation today with you. But as you think of things to do, and I'm going to leave it on the screen for a moment because I want to share with you a brief story. Sorry, it's my own experience, but everybody probably has a vegetable tale in their lives. Here's what happened. Growing up, I had several siblings, and we always had a Sunday dinner together around the table. Whoever was in our home at dinner time joined us and was able to be a part of the family meal. Every Sunday, there were always mixed vegetables. And every Sunday, there were 3 of us that did not want to eat those mixed vegetables. And so there would be these exchanges of, you need to clean your plate before you leave. You're not getting up until all of the food that you have on your plate has been eaten. There were all kinds of stressful interactions between parent and children. Both mom and dad got in on it. So we had to find a way to work through this. And what happened actually was one Sunday, both mom and dad got up and left the table while we were still sitting there with plates with vegetables on them that had not been eaten. This didn't happen very often, that we were left alone at the table, especially not the 3 of us. And my brother started playing this game with the food, which, playing at the table is not okay. But mom and dad were in the other room. They were in the kitchen already, so they couldn't see us. So we started this game. My brother became weaker and weaker and weaker, and he needed to do something to build up his strength. So he took a scoop of those dreaded vegetables. They turned into power pills, and he swallowed them down. And suddenly he had energy, and he was, strong. And so, of course, the 2 younger girls, we had to do the same thing. So we started pretending we were weaker and weaker and weaker, and we could only make it if we had scooped the vegetables onto the spoon and choked them down. And pretty soon we had finished all the vegetables on our plate. And it was kind of a fun game. Plus, we were playing at the table, and our parents didn't know. Well, this kind of went on for, weeks. It seems a long time when you're a little kid. But we thought we were doing just fine. But actually, my mom was pretty brilliant. And I'll tell you what she had actually done after we take another look at some of these suggestions on the screen. So, incentivize cleaning his plate, breaking the vegetable mounds into smaller sizes. When you clean your plate, then it's also bribery. Okay, swap out something. Ask for something that I'm sure he'll do, and then once that's done, I'll praise him and give some encouragement. Making the vegetables talk. These are great. These are great suggestions. Well, I'm going to take us back to our other slides here and see what we can come up with instead. So here's our boy. I'm sure that pile doesn't look that big in real life. But anyway, let me finish my story about my mom and the vegetables. Here's what happened. And I didn't figure it out for a long time. Actually, long after I was a parent. My mom didn't change her expectations about eating the vegetables at all. But what she did do was she changed the environment around it. She created a new environment. We thought we were playing at the table. We were actually eating our vegetables for our mother and had no idea. But what I like about this is that we can do that as educators too. We can create an environment that increases the probability of students engaging with us. And if they're engaging with us, then they're going to be engaging in activities of learning. And my definition of engagement is my being here matters. I first heard that from a consultant that was talking with a team of educators. My being here matters. If we can get kids to a place where they want to be a part, they need to be a part, they don't want to miss what's going on, whatever it is, then we've won that battle of engagement. We've won. If it's about winning and losing, actually they've won because they'll be the ones that learn more. But what if we started in our work to look for the hook, find the relevance of what we're instructing or what we're asking students to do, creating curiosity, building on prior knowledge that students have. We want them to feel like if you've got one of those children at home or a nephew or a niece that when it's time to go to practice, to ball practice or to the practice for the play, they're like, come on, I'm ready to go. They've got their equipment ready, they've got their uniforms on, they can't wait to get there and you are slowing them down. That's part of engagement as well. And wouldn't it be lovely if our students had that idea that I can't wait to get to Miss Stovall's class because something good's going to happen and I need to be there for it. Something to consider. So here's my ideas around investing in a learning-rich environment. First, we can create predictability, and you hear that so often about what our learners need. Creating predictability could be around schedules, the routines that we have. And actually, when you think about routines, sometimes we need to have a signal for an interruption to a routine. I had a calendar that stayed on the wall in my classroom, and I was pretty consistent in my attendance at school. And I would always let students know if I needed to be away for a meeting or if I was going to be out for half the day and there was going to be a guest teacher, my expectations around that. I was always good at preparing things. But sometimes things just happen. You've got a sick family member, you have a last minute something that you have to be a part of, and you can't give that information ahead of time to students. So we created an interruption routine signal, and it would be whoever came in as the guest teacher or who was covering the class, they would take that little sign that said, Mrs. Stovall will be back soon. Slap it on the calendar or on the agenda for the day. And then everybody knew. We talked about it ahead of time. It wasn't a surprise because I had already told them that, there'll be times when I might not be able to tell you that I'm going to be away. And so when you see that, this is my way of letting you know. As soon as I knew, I let you know. It worked. It worked for most of the students that I had. Not everyone, wasn't perfect, but it helped. And that's part of creating predictability. Oh, she told us there might be times she's not going to be able to be here. We have a guest teacher. Now we know what the expectations are. Sometimes auditory and visual prompts are helpful. I've been in buildings where this was at the elementary level, if I remember correctly, when it was time to transition, music came on over the intercom system. And all the students knew that when the music stopped, they should have had all their materials and moved on to the next area or to the next classroom. Nothing had to be said after they had taught this out. When there were new students that came, someone would explain that to them. So it was kind of like bringing it back out in front of everybody. And that's what they did to create predictability. Okay, here's some other things that you might consider. Grade level or school-wide vocabulary regarding expectations. We all use the same language. Another one, active supervision. I love active supervision. It's wandering with a purpose, work in the crowd. as a junior, senior high assistant principal, it's one of the rules in my life. I was everywhere in that building. I just moved around, said hello to people, commented on how they performed the night before at a game, if I had been present or if I had heard about it. I called students by name and pronounced it correctly. There was so much power in that. You know, how often do we get our name mispronounced? And it's kind of a little jab sometimes, it's a little annoyance. It's really important to have someone call you by your name and pronounce it correctly. Teach and model your expectations. Teach and model your expectations. Give examples, but also give non-examples. I had a student who taught me this, I'm ashamed to say out loud. I would say, you know, don't do that or stop doing this. And finally he turned to me and said, Mrs. Topol, what do you want me to do? And I was like, geez, I hadn't told him the yes. I hadn't told him what the yes looked like. I'd said the no, but I hadn't said the yes. Okay. And then giving explicit feedback. I learned this one in actually in a case conference. We're working with some adults. And the feedback from the instructor was, he's doing good, with a thumbs up. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means. I need explicit feedback about the student. And I'm sure the student did too. You know, okay, which piece was the part that I did well? Was it the beginning, the middle, or the end of it? Or was all of it okay? Or be explicit. Really like the way you finished up working up that problem was really hard and you stayed with it. And I saw that you worked and you erased and went back to it and looked at it again. And you did the work for this. Well done. Now let's see if it's, you know, what your answer looks like in comparison to what I was thinking. It was about the effort, not about the answer. And then we could always talk about, well, the answer was correct or not, but at least I've already given some explicit feedback on the behavior I want to see. Okay. Embedding what we expect all the time, everywhere. Okay. What are my expectations for this place? We can use pre-correction. Okay. How many of you have taken a toddler to the grocery store? Okay. I have. And before we went in, actually, my then toddler is now moving towards 30, and I could get verbatim what I used to say to him before we went in the store if I really wanted to. Okay, we're going in together. We're going to stay together. We're only going to buy what's on the list. We're not going to pick up anything else today. If we can't do that, and if there's some reason why you're unable to walk with me and stay and stick to the list, we're leaving. And I'll have to come back another time by myself. You know, but let's try, you know, it's a new day. Let's give this a whirl. Let's see what we can find in the store today. Now, do you want to hold the list or me? You know, that pre-correction, what are the expectations? You could do that for school, school as well. It doesn't have to be just the grocery store. You want to set students up for the win. Oops, wow, there's a win. Not sure how that happened, but we'll get back to where we wanted to be. Okay, set students up for the win. What that can look like is there's sometimes I've had students, or you see students that don't want to engage in what's going on in the classroom, or maybe they're tentative about responding or answering. We're having a discussion on a chapter the next couple of days. So I'm going to give that student 1 or 2 answers to the questions that I'm going to ask. And they can have those answers. And when I ask that particular question, if they're feeling bold enough, they can raise their hand and I'm going to call on them. Or I might just look to them to call on. If they give me the sign that they're not exactly ready, I'll move on. But I want them to know that they're a part of this group and they have things to contribute. So I'm going to give them that information. You know, it's not a trick. It's not like I want to see if I can catch kids in the wrong answer. I want them to learn this. And so by sharing an answer with them that they can share out, that may build some confidence. Okay. And that's important. The other investment that I think is really important and wanted to be sure to share, because I've seen it happening in buildings around our state, is reminding students of their successes, the ones they've already had, whether they're academic or relational or involved in sports. There are times when students are successful. Remember that. And also remember, how hard did you work when you wanted to, fill in the blank, join that team, or when you were trying to perfect your basketball shot, or when you were practicing tennis with, in PE class. How hard did you work on that? What was the effort that you had to put into that? Sometimes you have to use that same effort on things that we do in class too. Working hard is hard work, but you can be successful in this. And reminding kids of, remember the time that you did that? Remember when you told me about this and you made it and you did it? Sometimes that's just what they need to be encouraged to move forward. And it doesn't cost me anything to do that. It's an investment in that student and our class environment. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do another activity. In a moment, we're going to go to a Padlet that, let's see if I can find it. Well, I won't show it just yet. I'll tell you what we're going to do first. I want you to think about the investment strategies that I just shared out. And if there's one that you might be interested in trying, or one that you have used, what might that investment look like at your level, if you teach elementary or middle school or high school? Or what might it look like in your classroom or grade level or your own building in general? And those investments are the ones that we have. Here, I'm going to go back just a slide so that you can see them. These 6, give you a quick look again here, and then they will also be on the screen that we're going to go to. Create predictability, use active supervision, teach and model your expectations, embed the teaching of your expectations every day in every way, and set students up for the win, and remind students of their own successes. Okay, and here's what I'm going to ask you to do now. We have another Padlet here, and you should see it on your screen now, and you have the link to get there, and the directions are right here at the top. Choose one of these 6 strategies on the pink strip there, if you can see it, and just share out what it is that you might do or you have done. And you can share that by clicking on the pencil that's in the corner, or the plus sign actually turns into a pencil. And you can see that some of your colleagues have added things that they've done in their classes around active supervision or ensuring procedures are being taught. So creating predictability, using different strategies to support students. So I'm going to give you a moment to add those. Or if you want, you could add something to the chat. If that's something that you're more comfortable doing than going over to our Padlet there. So I'm going to give you just a moment to think on that and add something, or you're invited to. This is also something that you can come back to later. If you want to think on it and want to share, this Padlet will be around at least for the next year. And I almost forgot that there's actually a link that you can get to it from here as well. So I'll just give you a moment before I answer the why. Oh, thank you. Is it Jarita added something in the chat? teaching and modeling expectations. I think about telling what the expectations are, but I often don't think to model it. Yes. Yeah. What does it look like? I learned that from, oh, Jaretta. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was hoping that you would let me know if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. But Jaretta, that is really important. I learned it from students. They finally, in frustration, said, "What do you want us to do? What is it? You know, be clear, Mrs. Stovall." And they didn't quite say it that way, but I got the message. I got the message. I learned a lot from students. Okay, and the links are there again if you need to get to them. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. If you have some ideas and some suggestions to post or other comments, please go ahead and put those in the chat or on the Padlet. Because I want to really start to think about the why of this. So what's the big deal? You spent all this time, Elisa, talking about investing in the environment. Well, investment is prevention. It really is. Because remember, there are three places where we can actually intervene in behavior. Before it happens, while it's happening, or after it happens. And I could tell you that the most effective point would be before it happens. But I think if you reflect on maybe something that, you know, in your own life, I was thinking about having a conversation with the person that I love dearly in this life. We were traveling in a car and just doesn't like to use the GPS. Doesn't like to, you know, I know how to get there. We're going to get there. Especially if we're in a rental car and we've already got the GPS thing. You know, it would be so helpful not to get lost in a city that we don't know well. But when's the best time for me to have that conversation about, you know, the last time we went on a trip, we got lost for 3 hours and, you know, because you didn't want to, when's the best time to have that conversation, if at all? Before we're in the car, lost? While we're in the car, lost? Or after it's happened, before, you know, we go on another trip? Probably the most effective time would be before it happens, or at least we might be able to have a conversation without getting angry and upset. But you can save energy if, you know, you expend less energy and you have, you know, you're as prepared as you can be. You've shared your expectations. So something to think about. Okay. Any other thoughts that can go into the chat for the good of the group? And it looks like I need to take a moment to do some technical assistance here.
Do you know how to do that, Elisa?
Promote to panelist?
Yes.
I think I just did it.
Thank you.
Renee will be the one that can tell us for sure, but I believe I did. Let me know if it hasn't helped. Okay, well, all right, let's move on from investing in a learning rich environment because we've got a second consideration I want to share with you. Consideration number 2, behaviors communication. Okay, all behavior communicates something. Okay, if you're not sure that you believe me in that, I want you to take a look at these 5 pictures, and just, you know, if you want to jot down or you know, throw into the chat the number of the picture and what you think that behavior is communicating, or jot it down on your notes. And we'll see if we have the same understanding. You know, number 1, you see the little girl with the basketball. Number 2, there is a cute little baby that has a little buddy in their hand and has a smile on their face. Number 3 is the student with their head down. Number 4 is the young lady in front of her laptop. And number 5 is the little girl standing with her mouth open against the wall. Okay. You may have some ideas for what you think they're communicating, but here are mine. Okay. The little girl with the basketball, they won't let her play. I want to play too. If I was to look at or to listen to some of your thoughts about that, somebody might have said she just doesn't want to give up the basketball. She's saying mine and nobody else can have it, but she just wants to play. Okay? At least that's how I interpreted it. Grandma's here. That's why that baby's so happy. Okay. The student with his head down is like, this is just boring. And the young lady with the laptop might be saying, it's just too noisy in here. And I'm guessing somebody thought this little girl with against the wall was in timeout or something. But she's like, oh, I saw what you did. I'm telling. It's probably an older sibling. At least that's what I saw in this behavior. We don't always see the same thing, but behavior communicates something, and it always has a purpose. Typically, it's to obtain something or to get something. We do things to get something, whether they're sensory or whether it's attention or an automatic. Sometimes it's an automatic reaction. It might be control. To get something is one function of behavior, one of the most typical. The second is to avoid or escape. Whoa, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want the attention. It's sensory overload. I don't like these social situations. Though I think I kind of gross out my peers from time to time, I have to tell you that spitting is probably one of the most effective behaviors kids can use. If you want to be left alone and you spit on someone, they will leave you alone. Okay, most of the time. It is distasteful, it's gross, it's yucky, it's, we can go on and on, but it can be very effective if you want to be left alone. And if you don't know any other way to say, leave me alone, and you do know how to do that, it can get you what you want. Okay. So that's kind of what, how I see it, or what I've learned, I guess I should say, over spending time with boys and girls and young adults. So we know that there's a purpose and a function. So what's our response if we want to invest in relationships? I would submit, here's some things that you can do. You don't have to be the behavior specialist to do these things. Okay, now the first one, I get it. It can't happen often in some places. Eat in the cafeteria every once in a while, or pass through it so that you can see kids, when they're having their downtime. Okay. Go to extracurricular activities. You don't have to go to every single one, but if you like music and you know that the choir's going to perform, maybe you join, or maybe you go to a play every once in a while. So then you have something to talk to students that are involved in it about. And even if some of the students in your class aren't involved in those things, if you're talking about school activities, maybe they'll invite you to one of theirs. Okay. When you're in a building, meet with small groups of students when you can. Okay, if you have a structure where you've got houses or cross-level grade level groups, those might be opportunities. And we're beginning to do more of the social emotional learning activities in our buildings. Those are great times to just get to know students a little bit better. I should be able to say your name and pronounce it correctly and know what grade you're in, or at least whose class you might be in, okay, or something. Every student needs to have someone an adult, a responsible adult that knows their name in a building. And if there's kids that do not have that, that's our fault, and we need to fix that. Okay, participate in community service together. As the assistant principal at junior senior high, I had lots of opportunities to spend extra time with students that had made some poor choices during the day. And one of the things we did was, and this was back a way, so we were able to do this more easily. We decided that the cabinet that stored all of the trophies that went back to the 1930s needed to be cleaned. And so one evening, we donned all the appropriate gear and had cleansers that were safe for us to handle. And we went in and we cleaned, over our special time after school, also known as detention. We cleaned and buffed all of the trophies that were in that case. And do you know that there was a walking club of graduates from the school that would come through once a week or so? They noticed. And I was able to say when they asked about it, well, I had a group of students that were after school and we cleaned them all. Didn't have to tell them that they were there for detention. That's okay. It was still a community service project. And those are the things that you can invest in kids in a positive way, even if it's about detention and serving that. Make sure that you share the relevance of what you're teaching. And if there's a way that your students can create an activity for another set of students at a different grade level, or somehow do a cooperative program, we're creating connections. And those are the things that help sustain relationships in our buildings. And once you have a relationship with someone, it's really hard when you don't have an other and you know somebody by name. It's just easier to develop more of a relationship or to connect. It's not somebody out there that I really don't know. It's somebody that I have some knowledge of and some experience with, and we're all in the same community. Create connections. Okay. We've talked about fostering relationships and modeling and teaching expectations and being intentional about how we move around the building and what we do and how we interact to create that safety. There's got to be something else. And it really isn't magic, but I do want to share this with you. This is our third behavioral consideration. Behavior escalates in a predictable manner. It just does. We're wired that way. It starts with being at a calm state. And a calm state is when your body is ready for engagement. Our senses are really receptive. We can learn in this state. We're just kind of open, and sometimes it seems like it's a quiet state. You can still be alert, but you're ready to take in information. And that's when we learn best, at that calm state. That's probably the only time we can truly learn anything, in that calm state. If you ask some of the folks that have done the research on this, and this comes from Jeff Colvin and Terrence Scott, managing that cycle of acting out behavior, and some of the work that they've done. And we've had some opportunity to work with Terrence Scott here in Indiana. If you get an opportunity, take advantage of it. Very knowledgeable. So we've got that calm state. And then in this escalation scenario, that there's a trigger. Something moves you from your calm state. It interrupts the calm. It's a distraction. It can be internal or external. It could be a thought. It could be a smell that triggers a thought. It could be something that happens externally. And from there, from that trigger, there's an agitation, which it's hard to not focus on the trigger now. I was paying attention to the lesson, but now this trigger's interfering, and I keep coming back to that. And I might perseverate on it. If I was speaking and or talking, my speech might be short, clipped responses, because I'm very distracted now, and I'm that agitation has started. Then the next step would be acceleration, which just brings energy. And so it gets louder. Maybe the sound is in your head and it's louder. Maybe your voice is louder and you're making noise in the room. But that's the point where everything begins to speed up. We're kind of we've lost that calmness. And that acceleration will continue, if it's not interrupted, until we get to a peak point. And at that peak, that's the point where whatever we're going to do to exhibit the most severe behavior, it's going to happen at the peak. Okay? Whether we scream, yell, punch somebody, kick something, that's going to be the peak, where our energy is at its strongest, our anger is at its highest level. That's when things happen, and somebody could get hurt. Okay, that's the peak. At some point, And I had students that could stay at a peak for an hour. Others just a few minutes. It's just hot and then it starts to cool. It depends on the student and the situation, but there's always a de-escalation that comes. And that's when the energy begins to fade. It can spike again, depending on what we choose to do or not do in those moments, or where the student is internally. If it's a reoccurring thought and it takes them back to the peak, then they would come back to de-escalation again at some point. But that's when the energy starts to fade. And sometimes that's where you see kids that are really tired, they're fatigued. Sometimes kids will fall asleep. Sometimes they'll sob, and cry a little bit. It can be embarrassing. So you need to be aware of that. But at some point, they're going to de-escalate so that they're back down to that stage of recovery where the cycle ends and they're able to return to some activity or return to work and things kind of level out again. But the catch is that we all do this. This is part of our nature and it's very predictable. Some people move through this very quickly. Others spend a lot of time building or a lot of time at the peak or de-escalating a little bit and going back up. And, it's going to be individual to the person, but we all move through these stages. And what I want you to know, now that I've scared you with an escalation cycle, is that what we do makes a difference. Teacher response impacts student response. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things that you can do and consider when you're working with other individuals, not just children, probably significant others could be on that list too. But knowing the cycle helps us to be able to respond in a way that can be most proactive. So at the calm state, that's where all the work goes into it. That's where we can teach expectations, because remember the individual is at a point where they can actually hear it and learn. Talk about your expectations in your classroom and in the building when kids are calm. Make sure you talk about the consequences for the choices that they make, so it's not a surprise later on. Okay, so that's what's going to happen at the calm stage. That's where the teaching and learning goes on. Then we get to that trigger stage, and that's where it changes a little bit, because now they're starting to, again, they're starting to show that distraction. So we want to use correction and direction. And I liken that to coaching. When I was training sprinters, we would talk about all the different mechanics of running. But then when you get on that line and your heart starts beating and the starter's pistol goes off, it's just like a jolt of energy. So what do I do? What do I do? In that moment, I'm reminding them, talk through that, in their head, they need to be talking through, what are you supposed to do? Your hands are in this position, you lean forward, you're gonna drive out, remember to breathe, whatever it is that I needed them to remember to do in that moment. That's what I was trying to succinctly feed to them. So you might remind students of the choices that they have in the moment that have already been taught in the calm. Don't start a lecture on what you need to do, but now remember, we talked about, you can control your breathing. Okay, when you feel your ears are getting hot and you can feel that heat, remember what we said you could do, just a little bit of coaching. Sometimes kids can kind of move back from the trigger to being focused on what they need to be doing. The next step, if they don't move back down the escalation and continue or de-escalate, they continue to escalate, that would be that agitation stage. And that's when now we're reminding the students more clearly, control that breathing. I would say things to kids that we had already learned, such as, you can be as angry as you want. You can't hurt yourself, anyone else. And I said that all the time to kids, so they, it was an automatic thing. And so that would be something that they could kind of remember. Stay with the familiar. This is not a time to start a discourse on some other behavioral support mechanism. Just stay with it. They've got options. and they have choices that they can make. They're not out of control. Okay. Again, once we get to the acceleration stage, you can see that on the teacher response side, there are three things that don't change through acceleration, peak, and de-escalation: calm, action, and safety. That's what it's all about. Be aware of your tone of voice. Use if you have already taught your class a signal for privacy or we need to clear the room, do that if you can without, with signals and not words. You want to keep privacy in mind for the student, okay? Because they don't need an audience to escalate and you don't want anyone else hurt. But keep in mind, students can and will match our level of escalation. So if my voice goes up, their voice is likely to go up. If I stay a little bit more chill, it's possible that they can stay a little more chill as well. So again, in that acceleration, they're still moving up and there's still an opportunity. Maybe things could calm, maybe things could settle. The peak usually comes pretty quickly, okay? Because it's that explosive piece. There's a lot of energy around the peak. And what you can do, if your plan is to have others come in, you've taken students out perhaps, that would be a place where you want people to arrive quietly. Nobody needs to come charging in to save the day. There's no need for anyone else to say anything. Make sure there's only one person communicating to the student in that calm voice. It shouldn't change unless it has to for some reason. I typically went silent once they got to the peak. Made sure that they were safe, made sure others were out of the way, because I don't know how long the peak is going to last. I might quietly praise the group for respecting our privacy. Depends on the student, because that might be something that makes them more upset. At some point, the student's going to de-escalate, and we don't want them to shoot right back up into that peak. So again, it's just critical to let the energy fade. Okay. Sometimes I would have students at this point that were sobbing or crying, or some of that release was coming. Okay. We want them to know they're safe. We want to stay calm, and we want to let that energy fade. Okay, but that's all we're thinking about: calm and safety. And then the last stage, which is probably just as important as the first, we want to use that recovery time to reconnect with the student. You are still a member of this community, this classroom. Okay. Whatever happened, we can get through this. We're not going to talk about consequences and that comes later. Remember, we can only do that in the calm stage. But just reassure the relationship. This isn't the time for, now I told you so, the next time, this is not the time for that. We can talk about natural consequences or reparations. That comes later again in the calm. This is just reconnecting, reassuring, unconditional positive regard. I love that. I love that statement. It doesn't matter what you do, you still are part of this group, you still are part of my classroom, you still are a part of this community. There may be consequences outside of this, but you're still a part of us here, and we still care. I still care. And hopefully that preserves the relationship, so that then when you get back to a point of calm, you can talk about what needs to happen next, or consequences of the behavior. Natural consequences are a great tool. You make a mess, you clean it up. You do harm to someone, you need to make amends for that. And a tool that I've just recently come across is called repairing harm. And of course, I can't say in the moment, it just popped into my head. I'll try to get that resource posted on the Padlet. But it's a way of bringing kids together. It's a part of restorative justice piece, where you bring kids together to talk about what's happened, and then if there does need to be a repairing of the harm. the kids determine what it's supposed to be and what it should be instead of the adults. But I will share that out when we have an opportunity to post that. As you think about, okay, remember, I'm not the behavior specialist, but you can still plan your response, what you're going to do, and how you're going to proactively shape the environment that you're in. And here are some suggestions, things that you can teach during the calm. Teach students how to deal with their known triggers. If I know that it really ticks me off to do, fill in the blank, then maybe I can learn some things or think of some things that I can do to kind of deal with that before it blows up. I can tell when I'm getting mad because my neck gets really hot. So when my neck starts to get hot, what can I do to cool down? Okay. Teaching your class how to ignore or how to give someone privacy, because we can't always clear a room, but sometimes it doesn't help to have people watching you. And actually in the book on the screen, Teaching Behavior, there's a game called the Ignoring Game, where you actually teach kids how to ignore things that are loud and obnoxious and almost in your face. And it's done as a game, students against teacher, until they learn the skill, and then you can begin to embed it in your space with, you need to ignore right now. Teach your class a privacy signal so that you can clear the room if you need to, or so you can redirect that attention in the ignoring game. And one of the other things that is really powerful for students is, because students know when they have blow-ups, and it's not, we don't need to ignore it. We can talk about it in the calm if we do it appropriately with them. But let students know what happens when they're at their peak of emotions, because most of the time they don't remember it. They may remember bits and pieces and people, and but this is what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to keep you safe, because there's only two reasons we have rules at school: to keep people safe and so we can learn. And so I want to make sure that when you're having one of those times when you're really feeling angry or upset, I want you to know that I'm going to keep you safe. I want you to know that you still belong here. You're here until you're not. You're in my classroom, you're part of this program, you're part of this school, you're here until you're not. So you're going to be connected. Make sure they understand that unconditional positive regard. I'll take you back every time, okay? There may be some consequences that have to be addressed and so on, but you know what? You're welcome here. And it has to be genuine, so we have to work on ourselves sometimes to be able to say that. Make sure you have an opportunity to debrief or do a pulse check or a feelings check-in with the group. Because again, you are a group, and my behavior impacts you and yours impacts me. And that way you're taking care of the health of everybody in your space too. And then think about, what are the natural consequences and restitution. I was working with a team, and the student was at middle school, and he liked to elope, and he would tear up the space before he left. I mean, just turn things sideways and then leave. And one of the natural consequences, well, first of all, no one had ever told him that that wasn't okay. It's not okay for you to turn tables over and flip things off and then take off. I'm not saying, I wasn't telling him he couldn't do it, because obviously he was doing it. I said, but that's not okay, because I'm trying to keep you safe, and you got to be here to learn, and that's incongruent. So the natural consequences of that, the next time he ran, was the last thing he heard me saying was, this is not okay. This behavior is not okay. And then when he came back, we were able to start a conversation about the natural consequences and what needed to change, and how he could learn to do some different things to express what he was feeling. You might not be able to do all of that on your own, but perhaps there's some folks that can support you in that, where you're teaching, or you might, that might be something that feels pretty natural for you to do. I've thrown a lot of things out there at you in our time, and it's right about 11 o'clock. So I'm going to make sure that we have some time for your questions and comments. Last pieces that I want to share with you are, these are response plans, and they come out of the Terrence Scott book. But how do the steps to addressing provocative behavior when kids are just trying to provoke you into something, and some things that you would want to consider doing. So I wanted to share these with you. There's one for provocative behavior, and there's also one for noncompliance when kids don't want to do. And I'll just walk through this one because we often have kids that just don't want to comply. Those are the loves of my life. The few kids that if I said spit, they would swallow. Excuse my my example there, but that tells you where the noncompliance was. Provide one clear direction for the student to follow. So if I've told the class, okay, we're going to need to move back to our desk, get the books out, get our papers, and get started on this assignment, and I've got somebody that's not doing that or is choosing not to do that, then I back off and I just give one direction. Okay, move to the desk, and I stay with that until they comply. After that, I move to the next one. Okay, I'm gonna give them a thank you for that because I want to reinforce. So, okay, thanks, great, you got to your seat. Get that book out. Okay, and that's where you stay until they comply. If they comply, you again give that reinforcement and you move to the next step. Stay neutral. It's not about me. These are the rules of the class. This is, stay with the broken record. This is what I need you to do. Any other request the student might make is contingent on following that one direction that, the first direction you gave. Make sure to acknowledge everyone else that's on task in some way. And if you must, if you get to the place where there's, you've stonewalled, then what is your bottom line? What's the word I want to use? Your bottom line consequence, because at some point, we're not going to spend hours waiting for the first step, especially if we try to reinforce. And I typically said something to the effect of, at this point, we're getting to the place now where I'm not going to be able to make the decision about what happens to you, because this is going to have to leave our classroom. And once you leave with a discipline to go to the dean or the assistant principal or whomever, I don't have any control over where you go or when you get to come back. And I'd rather have you here learning with me. And many times that worked, sometimes it didn't, but it keeps the relationship. You've gone over my head now. I'm in charge of this space, but at some point I have to defer to my leadership as well, and they may have different options for you. And I'd really like to have you here in class. And again, it becomes their choice. Any questions or comments? Anything going on with the chat?
Nothing as of right now.
Okay, because I have just talked at you like you wouldn't believe. I hope it was helpful information, but now I'm going to share something with you. Thanks, Ange. By the way, I get this thing to move forward. There. Okay, you should be able to hear this. I've set the sound. Oh, wait, we've got some things in the chat box. Can you expand on staying with it? I'm not sure what you're staying with it. Tell me a little bit more about that, Sharetta. Oh, the one directive at a time. Just once they comply, it's like a broken record. Once you comply, then thank you, great, thanks, I appreciate it. Some way to acknowledge that, and then you move to the next step of what it is that they need to do. So instead of giving them all 4 things that you needed them to do, just one at a time, and sometimes just breaking it down, works. while you're directing this student, you're intermittently acknowledging the rest of the group for being on task and what they need to be doing. You want to be able to put the attention on that student saying the behavior that you're expecting. So if other students are doing that, I would just give a general comment of, thanks everybody. I appreciate the way you've gotten to work, or something. But it wouldn't be leaving kids waiting, and because the way before you get to this point, you've already shared expectations about what do you do when somebody needs more of my attention at this moment. If I've given you a directive, and if I haven't, then before I engage with the student, I would need to say, hey, this is what I need for the class. Okay, so you would have to come, you have to think through all this before you do it. It wouldn't be something to do in the moment. Who are the students that I know could work independently? Who are the students I know that they need to have a little support? And so how can I structure this? You don't want to keep everyone else waiting. Yeah, it's part of the setup, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to keep the class waiting on this student. That's a power play. We don't want that. You want to acknowledge, and if you haven't given the student something to do, there should always be something that you have in your pocket or an activity that, okay, we're going to shift from this, and I want you, I'm going to let that information settle. I want you to take out this and work on X, Y, Z. Just having a plan ahead of time so that you're not caught in that, now I've got a power play with a student. I hope that helps them. Yeah, it is part of the setup, as you said. Okay, now I'm going to share this with you just as kind of a reminder of why we do what we do.
You need to sit down so we can get the bus moving. We're not going while you're standing. Harper, that includes you. Sit down.
Whatever.
Harper, I'm not going to tell you again. I'm going to count to 3, and if you aren't seated, you're out of here. 1, 2, 3. Off. Let's go.
Forget it. I'm going home.
Not on my bus, you aren't. Harper needs to be escorted off.
All right, Harper. So.
Seriously, this is ridiculous.
Let's go. There are these kids out there, like Harper, that if I'm being totally honest, I'd have to say, I kind of enjoyed watching her get kicked off the bus. She is super obnoxious. You say something to her and she says the snottiest, surly remark, and there's a bit of satisfaction in going, bye, Harper, but like the other kids are. But what if I say, Harper gets kicked off the bus occasionally, and when she does, she doesn't come to school for a week, and she's already failing a lot of her classes. Then it kicks back in, oh right, I'm the adult here. And my job is to make the kid successful, even though I find this kid very annoying. My job is, how could I set her up to do it right, even when it's more pleasurable for me to see her do it wrong and get punished. And that's something that I think we have to be honest with ourselves about. That there are sometimes kids push you to the point where I don't do all of the things I should do because, let's face it, that kid leaving the room feels awfully good sometimes. And we have to just keep thinking about, again, eye on the prize. The win for me is that that kid maintains and stays in school. That's my job. And when I do that and make that happen, I'm the winner in that sense. So here's the solution video, which is very simple. The difference is, in this one, the bus driver is going to give her a reason. Here's what the rule is. That's why I need you to do this. And when Harper says something rude back, she says, here are some options. Up to you. Makes Harper make a decision.
Okay guys, let's have a seat so we can get started. I can't move the bus while we're standing because it's a safety issue, so sit down so we can get home, please. Come on Harper, have a seat please.
Hang on, I'm talking.
Can you have a seat there and turn around and finish your conversation, or even hop in the seat behind you and go ahead and have the finish your conversation, because I can't move the bus while you're standing. I'm not allowed.
Fine.
Thanks, Harper.
Now I know that this bus driver right now is thinking, I hate Harper. And that's okay. We can't help what you're feeling, and I understand it. But she also, at the same time, said, I'm going to give her every opportunity to be successful instead of escalating her behavior. In the last one, she just simply said, sit down. Harper said, whatever. And she said, I'm counting to 3, which in the history of behavior management has never worked to change anybody. 1, 2, 3, you're out. This time she said, here's why. Here are your choices. And it worked. It may or may not have worked. In this case, it did. But again, you don't have to love the kid to still be thinking this is the right thing to do. We've got to get people to think about that eye on the prize part.
I hope you found that to be as powerful as I have listening to it. Again, that's Dr. Terrence Scott and some of the work that he's done with us. The question came through the chat. This particular video is in our resources on our YouTube channel. I will pull out the name of the video, because we've got a lot of them there that he's done. He spent a lot of time with us here in Indiana, and make sure that I post that. Maybe I can put it on the Padlet so that you could see it there and get that information. And I'll make a note to do that. There are a couple of other resources that just wanted to make you aware of, and they're just things to kind of get you started. Again, this isn't something for building a whole behavior plan. It's just that small things that you can do to have small victories with students in order to build a relationship. And these are all kind of called just do it strategies. And this page is on the Padlet already. Think about how you might chunk tasks or determine work order. And if those are pieces that you can give to the student to determine, that makes it even better. You want to make sure all the skills are being taught are represented in it. But have a student divide up their work page into thirds or fourths, or a start, a middle, and a finish, or evens and odds, or some way so that they can indicate where they're going to start the task. It doesn't mean they're doing less work necessarily. It just means they're chunking it differently. I always like to have the student pick the ones that they thought were easy versus hard and decide which ones they wanted to do. Sometimes that helped me understand where their understanding was in the concept, if they saw this was hard as opposed to this piece was easy. Posting assignments in the same place every day, and the to-dos and the homework. That brings a lot of stability for a lot of kids. And remember, there are many different ways we collect homework. Sometimes you turn it into a bin or a basket on someone's desk. Sometimes you hit send and send it to an electronic folder. Sometimes it stays on your desk and your teacher comes around and collects it there. So being clear about our expectations is really important, because it's not the same in every classroom. Okay. Just a few make it happen strategies, which take a little bit longer to kind of set up, but can still be effective. And these are evidence-based practices, all of them. The pre-correction piece, the diatribe I gave on what's going to happen when we go into the store. Then I'd have my son say that, and he could. I'm going to make an independent choice. He knew what it meant, even if he couldn't pronounce it correctly. That pre-correction is powerful. Just a little reminder from one of your peers about what's going to happen when we take the next move. Giving requests in the form of a choice. That takes a little bit longer, because you've got to make sure that you can live with both of the choices. So they've got to be weighted evenly. Those visual cues, inviting that participation by sharing answers we talked about, increasing opportunities to respond, and then very specific praise. All are really powerful tools. And if you want more information about any of those, this is probably one of the best resources that it's been a great use of our tax dollars because it was created through the Department of Education. But now it's housed on the Center for PBIS. And what this document does, oh gosh, it's so full of information. It offers evidence-based strategies for classrooms, for school settings, and they're divided by elementary, middle school, and high school. They give you a how-to. There are videos to watch to show that this practice in, what it might look like in your classroom. And there's actually, you can kind of work through this whole document as kind of a personal professional development piece, or with a group, or something that you just drop in to get one little nugget of learning out of. And I really appreciate that they have examples and non-examples both. So it's a really strong resource, and it's still available. It's a couple of years old now, but it's still available online at the Center on PBIS. So that might be worth checking out. You can go to our YouTube channel and find videos. Now there's a lot of them there, but and I will give you the specific link to this, the why. I've noted that. But if you want to just look at and see what kinds of strategies and skills that Dr. Scott talked about when he was here in Indiana, and then the second link, the Center for Instructional and Behavioral Research in Schools, they have video examples of effective strategies. And it wasn't something that he taught here or shared with us in Indiana, just some of the work that they have done. Ooh, wow. I should have told you to buckle up at the beginning of this session, but I've tried to share some information and give you some resources. I would love to have feedback. I need to know what is important for you to know. And you're welcome to tell me anything you'd like for me to know. I taught long enough with students with challenging behavior that it's all been said. You can't hurt my feelings. I just want to make sure that we connect you to the resources that you're looking for in regards to behavior. If you'd like to do some more learning with our resource center, the second QR code on your screen, it takes you to the professional learning tab and gives you those examples. One of the other things we do have available for this particular topic, what can I do, is we have a work session. So if you go back and you use a couple strategies, or you try to figure out a way to use one, and you want to come back and meet with us, it's an informal session where people ask questions and share what they've been doing. It's not really training, but you're welcome to do that. Or if you have other questions that you'd like to have answered, we're happy to do that. And we'll look for an opportunity to connect with you again.
Elisa,
yes, ma'am.
there is a question about that PBIS document. Did
Yes.
you say that it is available on the Padlet that you shared?
It isn't. No, it's not on the Padlet. I don't think. No, wait. I should go to the Padlet and look, shouldn't I? I thought I did.
If not, if we could just get a link to that would be helpful.
Yeah. I can do that. I want to say it is, but it might have been last year's Padlet. But I'm not remembering. Okay, so I'll make a note to post that document, the PBI, and it is at pbis.org. And I used to have a PDF version of it. I know I still have it, that we could post. That would make it easier for you to get to. Someone's talking about the functional behavior assessment. Woo! we spent another session talking about that, and for developing a behavior intervention plan. That's always it's a little bit more than what the focus of this was, because a lot of folks just they aren't the behavior specialists. They haven't had that training, but what can I do, and things that you can use. So that's why we decided to share in two different areas of kind of just some basics to think about. It's so much is about the relationship and how you can establish one, because when there's not an us and a they, when it's just an us, things just go so much better. I'm not seeing any other questions for the moment, but I'll hang out for a bit. If there's anything else that you need, there's my contact information again. And beyond that these are all the ways you can get in touch with Indiana IP Resource Center. If you've got social media, we've got it all. And some numbers, that's the office at the Resource Center. This is my line specifically, and you can get me there if you need to. And I thank you for your time. I know there were some challenges with technology. I've been working off of my my hotspot without any internet right now in my part of the state, but I think we managed to get through. I hope that you were able to hear the information. It's my understanding that there will be a video, that a link or something that, of this session, if you want to get back to it. Hopefully that will happen. And wish you all well. If you need us, please find us. And have a good rest of the day. Thanks for joining us today.
And thanks specifically to our interpreters and captioners today too. We appreciate making things accessible.
Yes, thank you so much. And I tried to remember to slow down, but I'm sure I did not. I'm sorry. I get excited about behavior and talking. But thank you for supporting us. Again, here's the link for the evaluation. If you don't have, I'm not sure if it's in the browser or in the chat, but it's our Resource Center, indianaiprc.org/eval, EVAL. Someone's saying they can't use the QR code. Every once in a while, I have trouble with that too. I don't know if it's where I'm at or if it's the link.
That's okay. I put the link in the chat,
Thank you so much.
so it should click you right to it.
Yep. And thanks to you, that working on your phone is very hard. I appreciate that, Renee. Thanks for going the extra distance to join us. Well, take care, everybody, and thanks again.